beneath this group, this 13 families, is the Committee of 300. The Committee of 300 is the next layer in this pyramid of control. And guess where you all are? At the bottom layer. And isn't it interesting that on the US dollar is a pyramid with an eye watching everything that's underneath the pyramid? Now how do they explain that Egyptian Sumerian symbol on a US dollar? Do they explain it when you're in school? No. Do they say why there is an eye watching everything? No. What does the eye represent? The eye represents, if you remember, Osiris, the all-seeing eye, which goes back to the reptilian sun god of Nimrod. And it is a sun god because reptilians worship sun, and one of their symbols is a blazing sun. And you've seen them all over the place. Okay, sometimes they look like flames coming out of the sun, but in fact it's in the center of the Argentinian flag, where the winged reptilians are. They're all over the place if you keep your eyes open. Now, in addition to this symbol being on the US dollar, those of you who have a dollar left in your wallet, if you look underneath where it used to say E pluribus unum, it now says Novus Ordem Seclorum, which means New World Order. That's on your money. Okay, so it's already part of your money. And in addition, there's a globalization or unification of all the currencies of the earth, especially in Europe, where they use now the euro dollar, which the Europeans didn't like the word dollar in their currency, so now they just call it the euro. And if you look at the exchange rate, it's basically 1 for 1. US dollar will get you a euro. In South America, Ecuador has adopted the US dollar as its national currency. So has Costa Rica. Most of those people never saw a dollar in their life, but it's their national currency. And if you go to Argentina, the peso is 1 to 1 with the dollar. So Ronald Reagan and George Bush got their wish when they said that they wanted from Alaska to Argentina one economic unit. It exists right now. Europe, same thing. There is a United States of Europe. You can drive across any border without the use of a passport or even stopping. They'll stop you if they want to, but you don't have to stop. You don't need a passport. When you land at an airport in Europe, there is 2 lines, one for European market members and everybody else. And in Switzerland, there's even a line if you have a US or Canadian passport, there's a separate line for you. So there's all of this going on all over the earth, and if you travel a lot, you get to see all of this. Now, may I erase this part also? By the way, if you're interested in some of the names of this Committee of 300, I'll just give you a sample. One of the names, which you may not recognize, is called Agnelli. Agnelli, and they own the Fiat Corporation. And they tell the Italian government what to do. There is also the Spencers, Carringtons, Norman, Ford, Tafts, Roosevelt, Russell, Stewart spelled both ways with a U and an EW, Seaton, Hamilton, Campbell, Bush, Douglas, Montgomery, Balliol, Graham, Lindsay, Cameron, Wilson, Morgan, Harriman, Carnegie, Mellon, Oppenheimer, Rhodes, Hines, Savoy, Schiff, Kuhn, Loeb, Coolidge, and Delano. These are just samples of the Committee of 300 surnames that are being used. And I'll erase this now so I can give you some more information. Now, as I mentioned before the break, when these shape-shifting people do their ceremony, it always involves the use of human blood and hormones, because when you are trying to maintain a particular form, you need to intake the genetics of that form to maintain the integrity of it. Otherwise, you regress to your original form, which in their case would be reptilian. And you've heard the old stories, and there's even been movies and comedy made out of it, where there are these wealthy families in Europe, or even royalty, who have this family member that's locked away in a dungeon or in a tower because he's very strange. And whenever the people who are guests in the castle or the building go to look, they find this gigantic reptilian-like creature living locked away. It's because he reverted back to the original form and did not shapeshift any longer. He got stuck in the reptilian form. And as it's turning out, as the centuries are going by and the interbreeding and the intermarriage continues, they're finding it more and more difficult to maintain a human form. And so they're doing more and more ceremony on what is called the morphogenetic grid. And I know many of you have heard of this before. The Earth is very much like a body. Just like you have a chakra system and you have the meridians that come out of the chakra system, the Earth has energy centers and ley lines that come out of the energy centers and crisscross like a grid or a matrix. And on certain places where they intersect, there is a powerful energy vortex created. And that grid or that matrix of energy around the Earth is called the morphogenetic grid. And the reason the word genetic is in it is because it resonates to the occupants of the planet, so that there's a connection between the energy of the Earth and the energy of the humans or creatures that live on it, creating an interlocking unit called morphogenetic grid. If you're a chiropractor or an acupuncturist or acupressure, and you press a certain point of the body, you are actually affecting other parts of the body that are connected to that pressure point. Same on the Earth. If you perform a ceremony or create an energy pressure point at a specific part of the Earth's morphogenetic grid, you will then affect all the other parts of the Earth that you want to connect with. They perform their ritual and ceremony on such locations. For example, the pyramids of Egypt are located on a very big center point on the morphogenetic grid. Montauk is located at the edge of a morphogenetic grid. This point here in Montauk, Long Island, connects to Land's End in England. There's a direct connection. And when Aleister Crowley did his sexual magical rituals in Land's End, it connected directly to Montauk Point. Montauk Point is also part of the old Atlantean civilization. And it is in fact the top of a mountain chain that connects all the way down to the Caribbean Ocean. And the Montauk Indians' leader, they called a pharaoh. In fact, the name of the Montauk princess, her last name is Pharaoh. And, of course, that is related to the kings in Egypt, which then fall back to their common ancestor in the Atlantean time period. And in fact, up until the early part of this century, you could see the tops of pyramids along the beaches in Montauk Point, which have subsequently been covered up. In fact, the town of Montauk is located directly over a gigantic underground pyramid, which the government was very interested in accessing because of the technology that is inside of it. Basically, the control group, the Illuminati, is interested in mind controlling the entire population. Because let's face it, there's only a few thousand of them, and there's 6 billion of all of you. There's just not enough armies in the world that can control that size of a population. So the best way to do it is through mind control, and that's where the Montauk Project came into being, because it enabled them to test and develop specific mind control devices and techniques that were able to be put out into the public. And that's one of the things I was involved in at the time. When they do their rituals, it's on specific dates that mean something to them. Generally, it coincides with the full moon. One of their greatest holidays occurs on what you would call Halloween. That is a very important date for the reptilians. And that's where Halloween got the reputation of having ghosts and goblins and weird things happening, because that was a ceremony that they performed every October 31st. And recently, if you can recall, what incident occurred on Halloween that involved the deaths of a couple of hundred people in an instant? Egypt Air 990. Okay? That was part of a ritual ceremony slaughter. And where did it happen? Not far from Montauk Point. Okay? On this line. What else happened along that line that continues out like this? Well, let's map it. Here we had Egypt Air 990. Here we had, this is Long Island. Here we had TWA 800. Here we had Swiss Air 101. Gee, that looks kind of suspicious to me. Oh wait, there's something else. Right over here. Someone just said it. Why him? Well, let's look at one of the Illuminati members who's trying to work her way up the ladder, who's very high up the ladder, and you know her as Hillary Clinton. Okay? Now, Hillary Clinton never lived in New York State a day of her life, but she decided that it was in her best interest to become a state senator, so she moved to Westchester, New York, and the next day started to run for senator. But she had some competition. She had JFK Jr., who, if he ran for God, people would vote for him in New York. She also had Mayor Giuliani, who, by the way, the local people lovingly referred to as Giulianazi, because he's very strict and tough with a lot of things. Now, what is she going to do? Okay, people love Junior, and Giuliani's really tough, and New York is now, you know, crime-free practically and cleaned up. What's she going to do? She just got there. So what you do what any self-respecting Illuminati person would do, and then to kill your opponents. Okay? So she had JFK plane rigged with a bomb, and that worked very well. He took off from an airport here in central New Jersey. His flight plan, here's Martha's Vineyard, here's Connecticut, Rhode Island, there's New York City. This is there's water over here, here's Connecticut. His flight plan took him right across the coast, right here, and then he was going to go right across here to Martha's Vineyard. That's the standard flight plan from where he was. But something happened over here, just around the part where TWA crashed. It spooked him, and he cut across the island and then went east and went down over there. He was only 10 miles from the airport. Okay? Now, it took them, this is JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, Islip, Boston. This whole area is like radar central for the Earth. Okay? It took them 8 days to find a plane that was constantly monitored by radar. It took them 8 days to find a plane that was in this little area of the ocean, surrounded by islands and land that was not very deep water at all. The Kennedys never said a word about it. In fact, Caroline Kennedy, who lives on Long Island, didn't even go up there. She's the last one left. I would advise her not to leave her home. Okay? And so what happened was they finally found wreckage, okay? And then they brought the bodies up, autopsied them, burned them, and then put them back where they found them within 24 hours. Okay? Kennedys never said anything. You would think they would have a funeral.